Greetings, one and all. Welcome to yet another fantastic, scintillating, dynamic edition of Indaba, the place where knowledge grows, the voice of the Emancipation Support Committee, the voice of the people. Certainly, on tonight, we are usually accompanied by our fantastic and most dynamic Pan African Brother Shabaka. However, he's not available on tonight. I do have, however, with me on tonight Dr. Claudius Fergus, who will be taking us into the Africa Report. Tonight's Africa Report is going to be on the theme of trending African policies in asserting control over rare earths. Of course, following that, we'll be doing a viewpoint where, of course, we are in the middle of November month, and November month for Trinidad and Tobago is African History Month. To tell us about the origins of Black History Month, African History Month in Trinidad and Tobago, we will be doing an interview, of course, with Dr. Asha Kambon, one of the architects, one of the amazing, as it were, Pan-Africanists behind this national movement that so many of us take for granted. Following that, we'll be doing an update by way of the ESC, where Sister Khadija is going to come in and talk about the National African History Quiz and spoken word competitions. And last but not least, we would be hosting on tonight as a very special guest, Sister Roxanne Mohammed of the Black Agenda Project, talking about their activities within African History Month. With that said, I would like to hand over now to Baba Fergus as he gives us a sneak preview in terms of what's ahead for tonight's Africa Report.
Thank you, my brother, and greetings to our listeners worldwide, of course. Yes, so what really inspired this particular Africa Report, interestingly, was a statement that came out of Ghana with respect to cocoa. Yes, the Ghanaian government decided that they are going to stop exporting 50% of the cocoa, because most of that cocoa now is used, in the manufacture of chocolates in Switzerland and Britain and so on, and very little is utilized at home. So a multi-billion-dollar industry, and Ghana just gets about $2 billion out of that. But, because the future is in rare earths rather than in cocoa, not that cocoa is not valuable, tonight's report is on the protection of African resources, particularly rare earths, not only, but particularly rare earths. So, Rene, please bring up the clip for me.
Everybody. We have paid dearly for it. We, as Africans, have lost our land because we trusted too much. We Africans have lost our culture because we trusted too much. We have lost and continue to lose our resources because we trust too much.
That was Kenya's learned professor of law, P.L.O. Lumumba, courtesy the Alpha House. And this is your Africa Report. There hasn't been a time when Africa was not a major contributor to the advancement of humanity and knowledge in every facet of civilization. It is well known that African gold and labor were two of the most important factors in the emergence of Western capitalism from the 15th century onward. Later, West Africa's palm oil and groundnut oil lubricated the steam engines and revolutionized soap making in Europe's emerging industrial revolution. In this advanced phase of climate change, Africa is once again at the center of the scramble for critical resources, mainly tantalite, cobalt, and lithium, among others commonly known as rare earths. These minerals are not new to modern technology, but they are much more critical now than ever before in the emergence of artificial intelligence, that's AI, robotics, and nanotechnology, as well as the struggle for global power. Because of their critical role in the value chain of modern technologies, predatory capitalist firms are known to invest in violent militias and terrorist groups to destabilize mineral-rich regions of the continent to secure cheaper materials. One of many examples is Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, the DRC, rich in coltan, gold, and cassiterite, but which has deteriorated into a conflict zone dominated by non-state actors. Coincidentally, wherever vast reserves of these strategic minerals are found in the continent, sooner rather than later, well-armed gangs prevent governments from controlling these resources. While international media continually highlight the clashes between militias, they say little to nothing about the pillage of these rare minerals that the clashes facilitate. The traditional relationship of Europe and North America with Africa is one of predatory capitalism, raping Africa of her raw materials while deploying numerous strategies to prevent or stunt African industrialization. Just last week, the G7 signed a joint agreement with the African Development Bank and the African Finance Corporation to build a $600 million railway across South Central Africa from the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean, passing through a number of large mineral deposits. The G7 claim that this is to counter China's dominance in new African infrastructure, as if saving Africa from China is not simply to regain the pre-colonial stranglehold that Western capitalists had on African resources. The railway route is rich in tantalite, cobalt, lithium, and copper, among other strategic resources. Early independence leaders such as Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere, and Patrice Lumumba understood the blight of neocolonialism. Many who sought to fight it were eliminated by the CIA and other terrorist intelligence agencies of the West. Africans are again waking up to the need to control their continent's resources while seeking ways to maximize the benefits from their exploitation, rather than simply collect royalties or chicken feed from exporting them as raw materials. Let's consider some recent examples of African leaders decisive in walking the talk of mineral resource control. In 2017, Tanzania's former president, John Magufuli, declared economic warfare on foreign mining companies, which he accused of draining the country's mineral wealth. Subsequently, new legislation was passed to restate the country's sovereignty over its natural resources. Another exemplar is Uganda's president, Yoweri Museveni. Appalled by France's stranglehold on Niger's uranium supplies, Museveni refused unnamed Western investors access to Uganda's uranium, preferring to leave it in the ground until the country finds a use for it. Recently, Uganda contracted Russian scientists to build 2 nuclear power plants in Uganda using Ugandan uranium. The latest fight is over lithium. Lithium is a major input in the production of solar heaters, mobile phones, computers, batteries, robots, and electric vehicles. Within financial circles, lithium is hailed as the new gold or the new oil or petroleum. The analogies are easily understood in terms of the global economy. Lithium rose from $2,000 per ton in 2002 to $18,000 per ton in 2020 and climbing. Lithium is a soft silver-white metal. It is the world's lightest solid element at room temperature. It is also the most electrically positive metal and is highly flammable. You may recall the danger that Samsung S7 lithium batteries posed to the airline industry a few years ago. Extracting lithium from rocks is labor-intensive and extremely expensive. Thus, predator-industrialized countries do not hesitate to trigger unrest wherever they could in order to secure cheap supplies of rare earths and other strategic minerals. Zimbabwe has the largest proven reserves of lithium in Africa, followed by the DRC, Namibia, Ghana, Mali, and Nigeria. Only last week, Nigeria announced the discovery of high-grade lithium ores. China has the world's largest reserves, but prefers to exploit Africa. The same for the USA and other countries, while saving their own lithium for themselves. The reason is strategic. Lithium is a very rare mineral with a relatively small proven global reserve. Last December, Zimbabwe imposed a ban on raw lithium exports, a measure aimed at stopping the smuggling of lithium ore and forcing miners to process the mineral in the country. This processing involves converting the lithium mineral to lithium concentrates and lithium hydroxides before exporting. Namibia's Minister of Mines, Tom Awendo, told Reuters in an interview at the 2023 African Mining Indaba Conference in Cape Town, South Africa, "We are saying to ourselves, if you have the minerals that everybody wants now, you need to make sure that at least you probably mine those minerals differently and not in the usual manner. We are going to insist that all lithium mined within the country has to be processed in the country." African Mining Indaba is an annual event since 1994 that brings together visionaries and innovators across the mining value chain. There are other examples, but time does not allow to highlight them all. I will end on this philosophical note by civil rights activist James Baldwin. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. Yes, so there you have it, recent developments, and of course you can have a lot more, a long list. I would have played some of them, but then again, the voices, I normally like to bring the voices, but
Oh
it would
yeah.
have extended much too long, particularly Museveni, and then he speaks very slowly as well. So the voices are there, and of course, you can tap into a lot of those developments via YouTube as well. What's going on in Africa with respect to these very vital resources, not only for now, but for the future. And of course, the capitalist West understands that that's the future. Yes,
Absolutely,
my brother.
absolutely. So,
Yeah.
so a couple thoughts come readily to mind. First of all, the fact that in the DRC we have a situation where there have been 6 million persons unalived in internal conflicts as occasioned by these paid mercenaries who are working on behalf of foreign interests to destabilize the DRC and to allow for the rape and the robbery of their minerals. That's on the sad side. On the good side, I'm thinking about the work that Traore, His Excellency, the youngest president in Africa, is doing with respect to not only standing up for the integrity of the cost of the minerals that are coming out of his lands, but ensuring as well that the value addition is being engaged. That relationship that Yoweri Museveni has engaged with Russia to develop a power plant there so that they can process uranium, as far as I'm concerned, is a master chess move. I continue to see him as quite a leader within the African continent at this time. I know that he's pushing a number of Pan-African initiatives behind the scenes, and he seems to have found his foot, so to speak, with regards to making a conscientious stand that it's better to keep the minerals in the ground than to sell off the patrimony of the people for pennies on the dollar. Another brilliant episode of the Africa Report. And yes, I would have been very, very happy to hear those voices. But here we have now joining us Dr. Asha Kambon to take us through the history. We take for granted Black History Month in Trinidad and Tobago. November it is for us. In the Americas, it's in America in particular, the United States of America, it's in February month, the shortest month of the year, is their month in terms of Black History Month. My first question to you, apart from welcoming you to the platform on the program, I know you're in a cold region and I know it's a late o'clock where you are. So we want to thank you for the amazing sacrifice to join us on tonight. But having an exclusive interview with one of the great architects behind such a movement as Black History Month in Trinidad and Tobago is for us quite a feat, quite a phenomena. And so we would like to ask you on tonight, please walk us through, if you can, the history of Black History Month in Trinidad and Tobago. And again, very pleasant good night and welcome to Indaba.
Okay, welcome to all the listeners, and it's my pleasure to be here. Um, African History Month for us in Trinidad and Tobago is November. As we well know, and I'm going to just pull up my notes so that I'm not speaking off the top of my head at this hour in the morning. Okay, so African History Month is observed in the US and Canada in February, in the UK, in Germany, Ireland, and the Netherlands in October. And in Brazil and Trinidad and Tobago, it is November. So, how did we arrive at this November month? Well, actually, it's very interesting. Around 1987, 1988, a sister by the name of Maureen Thompson. Maureen had just come back from recently from UK studying, and she and I were chatting at home about how would we manage the notions of African history. Having just returned from the UK, you would know that the UK had sort of they had selected African History Month for October. And they did so jointly, interestingly, with a brother from Ghana, led the way, Adai Sibo, together with another Trinidadian brother, Engwai, I think his name was. The two of them sort of worked on this together with a team of brothers and sisters. And they selected October for African History Month because of the way in which they could negotiate and they could get brothers and sisters from North America, from the continent, and so on to come in and engage with their population and educate. Everyone who talked about African History Month in those days was about strengthening the knowledge base of our people and bringing it for the information forward in such a way that it could even possibly, with the hope that it could enter into the formal education system. So Maureen and myself were chatting about this idea, and we both, after much discussion, suggested it maybe November should be the best month for us because February just couldn't work because it's smack dab in the middle of Carnival. And although February was selected in North America because of Dr. Carter G. Woodson's work on the miseducation of the Negro, and he was the first who actually called for, in those days the word was Negro, a Negro History Week, and he had 2 weeks of Negro history. And the rebirth of the notion, or the renaissance, let's say, of African History Month took off in about, interestingly, 1969-70, the same time that the African consciousness was spreading around the world. So there you have the rebirth of it in North America in 1969-70, the establishment of it in the UK in October of about the 80s, and then myself and Maureen talking about it in 86, 87. And when we chatted about it, we decided to approach the African organizations in Trinidad and Tobago. At the time, I was both a founding member and member of TANA, and our good sister, Pat McLeod, was at the time chair of the African Association and people, our brother from UWI, who was head of the, what is the name of that group? They were called, was it Henry Christophe? It had an interesting name. I think I've got the name here. Let me get it. And they were also approached to participate in this event. And let me get the name of his organization out of UWI. Yes, the Club Louverture. It was Club Louverture from UWI and the UE African History Club at the time, which was led by our own Dr. Fitzbatiste. And eventually, when the Emancipation Support Committee came on stream, the Emancipation Support Committee, of course, became involved in African History Month. So it was from that humble beginning. And this is just to say that ideas, once rooted and you work at them, they can anyone can come can make something happen. So never think, oh, I have this idea and it's only me and I no. It, if it's solidly based in and working towards the development of our people, it can happen. So sure enough, um, from that humble beginning of just having a chat around how we can make this happen, Maureen Thompson, myself, Pat McLeod later on, and then our brother from the Club Louverture, Claudius, Dr. Fergus, you remember his name, an elderly gentleman whose name I cannot remember. He was also engaged in that in those early days, and Fitzbatiste, as I mentioned. And from that, it grew. The idea was to have lectures, to have film shows, to have community engagement. And we actually used to go from community centers. I remember the Belmont Community Center was a hotspot, lectures, discussion, and everyone gave of their time and energy to make sure that the month of November was just dynamic and full of knowledge sharing and information around African history. So that's how it got off the ground. And of course, the Emancipation Support Committee and many other organizations, and I know you're going to hear from our sister Roxanne Mohammed, definitely the Black Agenda Group, they for sure have taken on the task of strengthening African History Month and ensuring that things happen during that month. So that's how we got it off the ground, and you know, it's been growing ever since. And that was 1987, 88, and we are now in 2023. So I think it's just wonderful. I'm happy to see the way it has grown. Oh, you're muted, brother Kwame.
Brother Kwame, you're muted. So let me just ask you one question in the meantime while he gets his mic back up. Now, there is a existential difference between Black and African. I couldn't help noticing that Kwame introduced the subject matter saying Black History Month. You came in and you talked about African History Month. Was there any time that you called the History Month Black History Month?
No.
And I suspected not. I suspected
Go ahead,
not.
brother. Sorry,
The audience
I couldn't
needs
resist.
to know. Because, as you know, the Kwame Ture Memorials the Education Center promotes African history as well. And they have maintained the American terminology with Black History Month. Okay, so I think that needs to be noted that we have never referred to the month as Black History Month in terms of the Emancipation Support Committee.
That's right.
Now, the next thing I note
But
is
wait,
that
I should say, wait, I should let you know that in America, it's now called African American History Month.
okay, right.
So that's interesting as well.
Yeah.
They've brought it all around from Negro
Yeah.
to Black to African American History
Right,
Month.
because you don't have White History Month, you don't have Brown History Month, you don't have Yellow History Month. And I think it's important that we all move towards the African terminology, because I think it's essential that we do that. Okay, it's not just a name, it's not just a term, it's very, very fundamental. So I suppose Sister Roxanne might want to speak to that when she comes on as well. The next thing is the public participation in African History Month. Now, by the way, I did speak to your colleague last week, Maureen Thompson. She called me.
Okay,
And, so she gave me a little background as a preview, I should say, because we didn't anticipate this subject was coming on, about the foundation of the Black African History Month and the work with you in particular.
Yes.
Yeah, so you've simply endorsed that just now. Now, the public participation seems to be restricted mainly to the schools, but there may be one or two groups here and there.
Yes.
But I think it's still restricted. So from 1987 to now, I think we need to engage the public in more dynamic ways out beyond the schools. Yes, it gets into the community via, the television screening of the history quiz and so on. But I think we need something, a live, active participation of the greater public in celebrating African history, African achievements, and so on. You can
I
comment
agree with
on,
you. I
on that.
agree with you. We, in the early days, it was community driven. We actually went from community to community with African history films and storytelling and discussions and lectures. It was just community driven. Then there was the period when, as maybe our what should I say, maybe our volunteer base shrunk. We had to do things that we could manage. And so eventually, the history quiz and spoken word competition kind of absorbed all of our energy because it's really a tough and a rigorous bit of activity. But I do also think that there's room for us to do more outreach. I would love us to these community centers that have been built all over the country. I'd love us to be back in those community centers doing history at the people, at the where people are, and helping them understand their history, their significance. But the interesting thing, every now and then I send around a little note to some of our colleagues. For instance, those young men who won the bronze medal in the basketball. It just filled my heart. Every single young man had an African name. Did you know that? Did you notice that? The two brothers, the Boyd brothers, they're twins. They were Akim and Akil. The other young man was Jabari. The third brother was Chinwe. And so there's a generation where the knowledge that we passed on in the African History Month, that next generation, those people, those parents from all over Trinidad and Tobago, they went back and named their children with African names. So, and we need now to re-educate the next generation wherever they are, in whichever communities they are, so that can continue. We don't want to lose that. We don't want any generation gaps. We love it when we can see almost all our sports young men with their medals around their necks. Their names are African names, and they got that from their parents. And their parents were educated through the African History Month and the other work, of course, that the organization did over the last decades. It's decades of work that have us with all these children with African names all over the country now. And when I heard a minister the other day say he wasn't so sure that you could differentiate between the groups in Trinidad and Tobago because we are all one, I was in shock when in fact we have our African tradition, which we've held dear to our hearts and which we've passed on to our children and our families. And other groups like East Indians have done the same, and other groups like Chinese have done the same. So we should never be ashamed of acknowledging who we are, what we've contributed, and know who we are and make that happen.
I want to jump in if I can really quickly. There are two things that come to mind. One, what was the level of pushback like? You talked about a politician recently making a comment that was not so sacrosanct, so to speak, with regards to the pushback to African History Month. There's this tendency to make a soup of a big mismatch of all of the Trinidad and Tobago citizens into one homogenous creolized body. Surely at that time, 87, 88, there would have been some pushback. So that's part one. And then part two, before you leave, with regards to your ask, what do you think would be required for us to really revive it and bring it to the level of dynamism and power and pathos that we would like to see African History Month in Trinidad and Tobago by way of the financing, by way of the volunteerism, by way of other types of contributions and activities that can be done to really to bolster and to build up this month of November?
Well, first of all, I don't think there was pushback except from the formal media, the traditional media. They never liked the idea of African History Month. Maureen was a savvy media technician at the time, and she would be negotiating between all the little spaces she could get to ensure that we had some coverage in the media and making use of the media about it. But that to me was the source of a lot of pushback. There were a lot of journalists, some of them of mixed descent, either of various mixed descents, who were very wary of African History Month. And some of them actually built their career on writing satire
Mm,
around the historical knowledge and information that was shared during African History Month. And the papers allowed them to build a career of writing columns that were satirical. And I always told myself if I had time, I would go back and pull out all of those articles. And interestingly, some of those same journalists went
mm,
did research on, say, the Chinese contribution to Trinidad and Tobago. And during their early years, they spent their time ridiculing the, the work we were doing on the African contribution to Trinidad and Tobago. And then subsequently, I remember one of them actually wrote his doctorate on the Chinese contribution to Trinidad and Tobago. But so that's where the pushback came from. Young people who felt they controlled the spaces of the media. They were gatekeepers, and they would try to avoid having that information and that knowledge reach the wider audience. But of course, remember the 80s was a very what shall I say, intense and very activist period of our history. We think somehow that 1970 is where Black Power ended somehow. There's very little, I mean, no truth in that. At the 80s, we were in the communities working. We were hosting African naming ceremonies. We were running actually our supplemental learning school for children of African descent. Many of our children got their teeth wet on understanding African history and so on by that Saturday school. People like Sister Olabisi Koboni, who was and continues to be an amazing educator, and we had other educators with her, and we worked on a school for children, and it was just powerful, taking into consideration the work that was happening with Hakeem Madhubuti and in Chicago, and that trend, and G2 where you see out of New York, using some of their material and they using some of the material we created. It was an amazing moment. And so that enthusiasm and dynamism of African history fell right into African History Month. And we had no pushback. I mean, we had pushback, but we just kept plowing ahead. We are in a different time and a different moment. One of the things we've not been able to achieve, I think, as much as we need to, is that group of volunteers. We seem to have. It might be the times too where so many young people feel, well, they're worried they must be able to earn some resources from doing different things. So resource-based activism really kicked off after the disruption of the Grenada Revolution. That was the moment when we shifted from pure development, rich development work, to a more resource-based kind of work, if I call it that. I don't know what to call it, but I think we've lost the capacity to really fire people up and get young people to volunteer, because the kind of outreach work requires a lot of volunteer effort. It's time consuming. There's no glory in it. You've just got to keep working hard. But I
Yes,
think it's
salt of the earth, they call that. You are the salt of the earth. So that on that note, we want to thank you, Dr. Sister Asha Cambon, for being with us this evening. And we are going to continue the practical aspect of that as it happens now with Sister Khadija Dyer. Give us an update on what's going on with African History Quiz. So good evening and welcome, Khadija.
Good evening. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So far, the competitions has been a successful and enlightening experience. This both competition, the African History Quiz, and spoken word competition provides a platform for students to showcase their knowledge as well as to foster deeper understanding of the contributions of Africans in diaspora to the world's development. Um, just to give a brief idea of how far we have reached so far. So far, we have conducted the preliminary rounds and the quarterfinals of both competition. The schools made sure the students made sure they say, "Miss, call out my school." So I have to call out all of the schools. So we have Naprima Girls High School. They are the defending champions, two-time champions. So we have 21 schools competing against to take the trophy, the Dr. Olubisi Kabuni Challenge Trophy away from Naprima Girls High. St. Francis Girls College. We have El Dorado East Secondary, Arima Central Secondary, St. Stephen's College, Speyside High School, our only school from Tobago, Holy Faith Convent Penal, Marbella North, Marbella South, Barrackport East, Destiny Secondary, Waterloo Secondary, Sagni Grande Secondary, St. Joseph Convent San Fernando, St. Mary's College, Holy Name Port of Spain, Arima North Secondary, Malabar Secondary, and San Fernando West Secondary. And it's really great that we got nice spread of schools across the country, Trinidad, Tobago, East, West, North, and South. Um, for the spoken word, we started the regional competition in May last term, and we had 41 students competing. 25 of those moved forward to the national spoken word competition. Schools, Brazil RC, they are our defending champions. Arima Centenary, Bataria Anglican, Las Lomas Government, Symbolics RC, Success RC, Malabar RC, Santa Rosa Government, Newton Girls RC, Riversdale Presbyterian, Escalier St. Jerome, Anglican, and Faber Government. And again, we have a nice spread of the schools across the country. Um, Going forward on this Saturday, we will be hosting the semi-final round of the competition, and next week Saturday, the final round of the competition. I must mention that we have been doing the African History Quiz since 2009, and it came out of that need to for the children, especially to know about their African history and their culture, because Emancipation Day is celebrated outside of the school term. And by the time September do come around, they've really focused on independence and not so much on emancipation. And the the project really took off in 2011, and in 2012, Republic Bank came on board as our main sponsor through the Power to Make a Difference program. And we really want to thank the Republic Bank team for sticking with us throughout the years. And it's really a hands-on team. They just leave us for us to do competition on our own. They are there with us in interacting with the students, interacting with the teachers as well. Also want to thank our judges who have been there with us over the years, assisting and guiding the students, both in the secondary schools and the primary schools, for on African history and their culture. Also to mention, this year the spoken word booklet is in tribute to our national instrument. It hasn't been proclaimed as yet, but we are saying it's our national instrument. Um, United Nations would have granted or commemorated both Steel Monday and August 11th. So the students were given six selections, six calypsos that pay tribute to the steel pan that they have to perform, and we call that talk calypso. The African History Quiz booklet, again, focus on Ghana, the contribution of Ghana, as it pays tribute to the Asante Hene that visited for the Pan African Festival commemorating emancipation this year. We also provided some information on what we refer to them as scientists, the those persons who have contributed to the development of the steel pan right here in Trinidad and Tobago. And it's amazing that the students didn't even know this. It was so in talking to them, asking them to know who Ellie Manet is, Vincent Spree Simon, Anthony Williams, and they're like, Miss, we don't know who these people are because they're even taught in their schools. So, they go through the booklet with much enthusiasm, besides wanting to win the competition. Of course, they want to win the competition to have that bragging rights. They are also developing their knowledge. They are heightening, their understanding and awareness of the African contribution to the world development.
Thank you
Thank
so much,
you so much.
Mr. Khadija, and we'll see you again next week, perhaps, to get another update. Yes, so at this point, I think we should bring in our final guest for this evening, the beloved sister Roxanne Mohammed. Yes, and she is going to continue that conversation. It seems to be one theme with our guest this evening on Black History Month. Yes. So over to you, my brother. I think you may have a special question to ask her.
Oh, thank you so very much. Well, first of all, thank you both to you and to your very illustrious and erudite husband who has been blazing the trail, so to speak, with regards to African education and programmatic action, pragmatic action. And it's something that you are really, really passionate about. You are not so much the talk, you are more the walk behind the scenes. But one of the things that we know about your organization, the Black Agenda Project, is that for you, African History Month is 2407, 365 days, and 66 on the leap year. My first question to you would be, first of all, how do you do as much as you do as an organization, not only in terms of celebrating African History Month, and we look forward to those amazing details in terms of the activities. But beyond that, all of the other things that you do all year round. What is the secret sauce? What's the big mystery behind all of the amazing things that you do there at the Kwame Ture Education and Development Center, and by extension, the Black of course, Agenda Project in Trinidad and Tobago. And again, a very pleasant good night to you and welcome Sister Roxanne Mohammed to Indaba.
Good evening, Brother Kwame, Professor Reverend Kwame, Professor Fergus. I want to thank you all for the opportunity to sit with you all this evening, and I want to especially thank Dr. Cambon, Asha Cambon, and Sister Maureen Thompson. I'm literally standing while they are alive on their shoulders. So, to even come after her, I mean, I have so much great respect and for Dr. Cambon. So thank you all for the opportunity. Brother Kwame, the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad is, he says it simply, do for self and love our people more than they hate themselves. We have to go to them with an extra dose of love. And I think the work in the community and the work we have continued doing without being funded is driven simply by one word, a four-letter word, love. you know, um, African History Month for us, when we found out that it was celebrated or acknowledged in the month of November, when we opened the Kwame Ture Center, one of the first things we did in 2018, we opened in May, and that very year we launched a month of activities at the center. We had the schools coming in. There was a career fair. We had organizations like Central Bank and UTT come in to speak to our young people. We hosted a number of exhibitions from National Archives. The 1970 Black Power exhibition, Butler exhibition, African Roots and Roots, our African heritage, the Americans. So our people coming in on a daily basis can interact with information. And that was in 2018 when we opened. And we have consistently every year tried to increase and improve upon what we do. I listened to Professor Fergus earlier speaking about trying to get it into the community and moving it away from the schools, and that is one of the things we do at Kwame Ture Center. So just quickly, this year our theme is Black to the Future. Professor Fergus, I love you, but it's Black to the Future, and I'm not going to waste the time. We will have the discussion about African and Black at another forum, but we recognize that as Trinidad and Tobago um, evolves, as we develop, our community is being looked at and seen in a particular light, not in the light that we should be seen. So I always say change your conversation, because the vast majority of
Mm.
our people are hardworking, committed, successful. And as Dr. Ralph Henry, he has coined the term, we are inspitists. We are successful in spite of all
Insight
the
it.
challenges and the
I love it.
pitfalls that you know in our past. So we wanted to focus on the future while we look at our history. So what are we doing this year? This year we launched African History Month on last Sunday. We had a number of persons at the Kwame Ture Center. Within this month, we were able to, as the month has started, host like the African Credit Union for an event there. Um, on Sunday, we are hosting a businessman from Guyana who's going to deal with the Venezuela Guyana conflict right now. And we, in all our sessions, we invite the entire community out. So this brother Dennis Mohammed, he is a pharmacist in Guyana, but he's also Minister Farrakhan's Guyanese representative. And he has a strong network with regards to the Guyana community. So he will be in Trinidad on Sunday at the Kwame Ture Center from 11 a.m. dealing with that issue. We have relaunched our George Padmore, this cycle of the George Padmore Boys Academy, which was the session was
Awesome.
on Saturday. And we have probably over 60 young men from the ages of 5 to 17 coming to the center, interacting with the information. We have had persons coming in and mentoring them, and a number of attorneys and farmers and a wide cross section of men coming in to mentor our young men and lecture to them. But the foundation is our African history. The Girls Academy, we also have our Girls Academy, the Young Black Queens Girls Academy and Mentorship Program that has restarted within the month of November. We have Brother Rubaderi Victor on this Saturday coming in to speak with our young men at the center. On Saturday 25th, we host a reparations conversation
Mm.
where um, we have the son of Patrick Manning, Brother David Manning, who has done a thesis paper on reparations, and he will be presenting that paper. And
Interesting.
we are inviting our community to come out, because I'll tell you something, Professor Fergus and Reverend Kwame. This is the 9th year in the United Nations International Decade for People of African Descent. The theme, recognition, justice,
And
development.
development.
Governments, we have had 2 governments. The UNC when it started in 2015, and we now have the People's National Movement. And not a word yet, not a word. And as a community, we cannot feel comfortable, we cannot be comfortable in not ensuring that at the 10-year mark that something tangible and something things tangible are given to the African community in development. They have to first recognize that, as the United Nations said, there's racial intolerance, racial injustice, xenophobia. Black people have suffered. There is systematic and institutional racism. And our government must recognize that. And as they recognize that, there must be justice involved there. So, recognition, justice, and then after they give some kind of justice, because justice comes with equity and equality, when that justice comes, I'm talking about economic justice, I'm talking about education. We have to look at the span. Then we look at development, and development, any nation, any independent organization, the foundation for independence is land. So I'm saying on Indaba that come 20, we are going into the last year. And as a Black community, we should not feel comfortable in being in a country where the vast majority of the population of people of African descent, when we look at the television and we listen to the radio, we are seeing the disproportionate, focus on people of African descent involved in certain activities on the media, but not highlighting our positives. So you need to empower organizations with what is required to aid in the development of our community. So I'm saying that. So the Conference on Reparations will be that springboard to engage in that final conversation about the last year in the decade for people of African descent and what our government must do and must give to the African community in Trinidad and Tobago. So that conference with Mr. Manning, I have spoken to some of our great elders who have given me the commitment to be there to respond to the paper on the 25th. So that conference is Saturday the 25th of November from 3 p.m. We also have on Sunday the 26th Professor Kwame Nantambu, again doing another historical lecture. We invite the community out. That is from 11. The month culminates, but even before that, there's a youth assembly on the 17th of November, where we are working with our young students at the universities, our young students at the secondary school, and they're going to have a conversation among themselves. And they're going to look at issues like AI and all these issues that we are getting, Professor Fergus, we're not as young as we used to be. So we need to, Reverend Kwame is a little younger, so I see emancipation hasn't there. We need to get the youth involved in this work. So as Dr. Cambon said, we will create a cadre of a lot more volunteers if we get the youth involved, get the youth talking, let the youth sit with the youth and have that kind of panchayat where we, as we do at the center, we have the 1970 Revolution exhibition from National Archives, and Brother Clive Nunes will be there constantly speaking to the students, but his pictures on the on the boards. So they're seeing a young Clive Nunes, but then they're seeing the real man now, who is about 60 years older, but he's talking to them about the struggle. So that is a constant at the Kwame Ture Center. So for this month, the month culminates on December 2nd, the last weekend. It culminates in our black market, which is economics.
Yes.
Because politics without economics is a symbol without substance. So as a community, we must pivot as much as possible, almost everything we do, with some kind of economic balance. We must encourage our Black-owned businesses. We must create opportunities for them. I'll say one thing, if I can. In the UK, we've been in the UK recently, doing some work there. There was an event called Black Eats London. So it's usually in the summer months. And they shut down a street, and there are over probably 75 Black-owned businesses. most of them selling foods from all over the diaspora, but books and jewelry and arts and crafts and clothing and so on. And this year, and so we are doing work with the businesses in the UK and in Trinidad and trying to forge synergies and so on. But this year you're walking through and you're seeing doubles representing Trinidad and Tobago for £9. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. That doubles represents black eats, black food in London, in the UK. It's because we have not properly marketed our thing, our food, retail. So at our black market this year, we have a Black Eats Trinidad section where you will come and get accra. You will come and get your crab
I
and
love it.
dumpling. You will come and get pilau. So there are about 7 vendors doing indigenous African foods. We have, foods from the continent, about 7 vendors, because I think it's imperative if we talk economics and we look at trade, that these are the areas we look at, because when you see, and let me tell you, doubles is being sold for £9 at Blackheath's London and £13. Listen,
Wow.
2 barrel and about 12 channel, £13 at a restaurant in London. £13. I mean, I went to the restaurant and I didn't pay for them doubles, but it was my son's friend's place, but £13. So can you imagine if our float and saltfish was promoted and we can sell that there, our bacon saltfish, our bacon fish. Can you imagine the opportunities if our foods were promoted like that? The opportunities we will create for businesses and the great chefs within our community. So our month culminates on December the 2nd with the black market. But as Brother Kwame said, at the Kwame Ture Education and Development Center, we are constantly, you come in any given day and you will interact with information. There are books, there are things on the walls. We have in our image, Brother Adieme has his shop there. So if you want to purchase any posters, anything, any pictures, you can come in. So Brother Adieme's shop has been there. It's going to be there for the rest of this month into all of Black History Month. So there are a
Powerful.
host of posters that one can come purchase, books, come and purchase. And, after African History Month, we will be keeping a few of the businesses there. So in addition to, because we have to start looking at economic development. So I want to thank you all for the opportunity. Professor Fergus, we're going to have that conversation about African versus Black. We're going to have that conversation. But
I
when we
look
have
forward to
questions,
it.
we're going to
I
have
look
another
forward to
program.
it. And I know that you both are absolutely apt for such a true conversation, as we like to say. But there are people listening in on tonight. By the way, a very pleasant good night to Brother Adeyemi Hines, to Afua Rudder, our Honduras listeners, our Oregon listeners, our continental listeners. You're blazing the chats. Persons are really enthusiastic about tonight's discourse,
Yes,
talking
sir.
about the various history months that celebrate blackness, Africanness in their jurisdiction. For instance, in Honduras, they celebrated in the month of April, according to one of my colleagues, Dr. E. Banks in Honduras. And he's one of those activists on the ground supporting and pushing and agitating for it. How can someone make contact with the Kwame Ture Education and Development Center? Maybe they have a few pennies that they would want to contribute to what you're doing. Perhaps they'd like to volunteer in kind. Maybe it's a lecture. Perhaps they want to donate some food items to the less fortunate within the community that you're in. Perhaps it's other types of volunteerism and service. For the ardent listener, for the Pan Africanist, for the person that wants to secure that African future and they want to support, they want to get involved, please tell them on tonight, before I turn over to Dr. Fergus for his question, how can they make contact with you?
Thank you so much. We are on social media, Facebook. You can go on to the Black Agenda Project. You can go on Facebook. There is also the Kwame Ture Education and Development Center on Facebook. Contact numbers are 866-757-7955. That's the mobile number. Or you can contact us via email, Kwame Ture EDC Education Development Center, Kwame Ture, KWAMETUREEDC @gmail.com. Any of the we are also on Instagram, so you can go on to Black Agenda Project on Facebook and Instagram, Kwame Ture Education and Development Center on Facebook and Instagram, or feel free to send us an email at kwametureedc @gmail.com, or call 757-7955, or our landline at the office 230-1556.
Dr.
Okay,
Fergus,
thank
over
you
to
very
you.
much. Yes, yes, my brother. And if anyone backstage can put up those numbers in the chat for us, I think we would appreciate that
Excellent
very, very,
suggestion.
very much.
Via
Yes,
YouTube, via Facebook,
yeah.
yes.
and
Brother
and with
Kwame, while you were speaking just now, I was thinking that the comments that we are getting is virtually a page of history that we have there. The most historical set of comments that I've seen, and I want to really thank the listeners for their contribution as well. They're very, very dynamic, very historical. I think we need to save those comments to add to the information that was given out this evening. Yes, of course, Brother David is my favorite educator. I want to say that very much, and of course, Sister Roxanne is she's not a lieutenant. She's also an equal general in the field of education, public education. And I want to say that those young people that you want, that we want, I think they're there. And I think Kwame can validate that. They are there. They
yes.
need to be mobilized. They need to be organized because not everybody is a leader. There are people who need that leadership in order to bring them together, to create that momentum that they perhaps would be too grateful to know that they are part of this development rather than being in their own shell doing their own work. A number of people want to get out, they want to contribute, but most people really don't know how. It's a potential resource that we have sitting there. The people are there. It's not to say they are not young people who would be willing to be mobilized, but perhaps we need a list of these people, a database that we can pull together and come up with and tap into that for whatever projects that we have ongoing. But it's a necessary thing. It was there at one time, as we have heard from Sister Asha. It was there. You are doing that work right now with the public. There's one thing I want to address, not so much in terms of a question, but for you to elaborate on. And you said that the Comiture Center is going to continue pursuing the history while working, towards the future with projects and so on. My take on what you do at the center is that you use history as a sort of foundational ideology and knowledge base in order to prepare you for the future. So it's not like doing one and doing something else. To me, they are wrapped together as one package. Could you comment on that? How you utilize your history in order to create a much more dynamic and solid thinking person in order to be able to be more successful in the projects that you are doing and to prepare themselves to face the future?
Thank you, Brother Fergus. As I said when I started, this was history this afternoon, or this evening, sorry, because I'm standing. I came after Dr. Asha Kambon, who has laid a foundation. I am younger, but she has laid a path along with persons like Maureen Thompson and Ian McLeod. They have laid a foundation, but we are in the present and we are talking about the future. At the Kwame Ture Center, um, For example, we have the CLIP program, the Community Leadership Lessons Intervention Program, which is a free CXC lessons program. And the math teacher, the person is out of the country now, but the math teacher in teaching math, in teaching vectors, will look at the Dogon tribe and speak about that in teaching math and how they would have mapped their path via the stars and that kind of thing. Whatever we do, our history, our experiences are used. Our girls' academy, the girls, as you come in, you will know about Claudia Jones, you will know about Queen Nanny, you know our history. The boys also know about not only the feminine but the masculine. So pivoted the foundation. You come into the center and the walls. We have the energy of the ancestors, huge pictures, 6 feet pictures on the walls of the center. Henry Sylvester Williams, George Padmore, the C.L.R. James, the fathers of Pan-Africanism. So as you go around and then you come into the center, the walls of the center has our great inventions and our kings and queens. So it's a way of life for us. History is a way of life. So we live it while we do the work in the present to advance the future. So for us, as the theme this year is Black to the Future. There's a reason for that. Our youth, our community is being misrepresented. Yes, there are a lot of Black youth who are involved in, but there are Black youth who are involved in crime. But there are others who are involved in other levels of crime that we will call white collar crime. That is not represented. We don't know who did the hacks and so on with the TSTT thing. So the white collar crime is not represented, but our Black youth and our community is misrepresented. So when we say Black to the Future, we want to bring our youth, our people, front and center and let them represent our experience and our community, because the media does not do that for us. Dr. Cambon spoke about the basketball team, and ironically, I was in Maloney on Sunday, and I spoke with the coach Christopher, I think it's Christopher Jackson. I met him, by the way, and we had a long conversation. He will be speaking to the boys' academy at the boys' academy, and he was part of Lloyd Best's Tapia movement. I mean, he may not be, he's a quiet, so in me saying this publicly now, he'll be, oh my God, aghast. But he was, Dr. Cambon spoke about the names of the youth who were involved. And Coach Jackson, I think it's Christopher Jackson or Jackson, Coach Christopher, he very conscious but very humble man from Maloney who has taken a team of Black youth to play in an international tournament, and we came back with bronze. So our people have consistently and repeatedly been doing work to put Trinidad and Tobago on the map for others to trade on, for others to benefit from. Because when they go out there and you hear Trinidad and the names that one links with it is only people of African descent, vast majority. So we have to bring that to the forefront again, so that our youth feel pride. There is confidence in themselves, because what the media is doing, they're doing a serious mind job on our community and our young people. So if all you see your criminals and a Black youth is being arrested, and that's all you're seeing on the media, on social media, we have a responsibility with the youth we are bringing together to change that conversation and speak the truth about ourselves and represent the truth about our community.
Sister Roxanne, I want to just mention one more thing, but that is very dear to my heart. That's about the food that you mentioned.
Yeah?
The Accra, the food,
Yes, sir.
cuisine.
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
I think that is one area that we can utilize in order to promote African consciousness. But we have a
Yes.
lot of reversing to do because, as you know, a lot of the foods that we eat, a lot of the ingredients are African. They are from Africa. You know, the pigeon, most of the beans and peas that we eat are African indigenous crops. A lot of them, most of them. From and you know, if Chinese put soy sauce on plantain, they will call it Chinese plantain. You know, if Indians put curry on something, they call it curry so and so, Indian so and so. The Africans would prepare their meals almost exactly the same way they did in Africa. They may just have one small little bit of ingredient that is perhaps from the environment here or imported, and they would call it Creole food. You see, so that terminology is very critical as a colonial, a colonized
Mm.
kind of mentality that we have continued with to our own detriment. We need to repossess our African labels for so many things, and food is one of them. You know, it is something we need to do consciously to promote that what we are eating is African, whether we add a little bit, a dash of this and a dash of that, and this is African. You would be amazed to know I've done some work on that. I can, share it with you, on the what would be the botanical legacy of Africa, you know, in the cuisine, the legacy of Africa, with names that sometimes we still use, if not in Trinidad, in some other part of the Caribbean, and some of the ingredients exactly the same, when I went to Curacao for the first time, I realized that, you know, they still grow African grain there. We don't do it here in Trinidad. Yeah, you know, they grow African grains there so that the meals carry some of the same names as well. What may be pay me here might be something else somewhere else, dokomi somewhere else, but it is
Jollof,
the same thing when you go. Yeah, you may say peas and rice,
jollof, pilau, peas and
pillow,
rice.
but you
Yeah,
go
cook
to
up.
Africa, you see the same thing, exactly the same thing. I remember, just to end with this note, my grand uncle always used to be cooking peas with rice. He never would cook peas without rice. No matter what, he would put peas in it. I couldn't understand why wouldn't he cook this plain rice for me, And it's not until, I went to Ghana, Nigeria, and so I realized, people hardly cook white rice too. You know, peas and rice, peas and rice. And when I went to Vincent, I realized Vincentians don't eat white rice either. And they have preserved a lot of the African ways of cooking, peas and rice, whatever name you call it, is African. We need to call the things African. And I think we'll go a long way in building pride and consciousness in things Africa and dispelling, this self hate about Africa and African and everything African and African culture. Yeah. So that's
Uh,
about just the quick thing.
yes,
So you
so
can come in,
I'm thankful for
and then
that.
Kwame, you can take us out after.
I'm
Sure, no
thankful for
problem.
that point, Dr. Fergus, because I'm food, and at the Kwame Ture Center we launched uh, 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 um, farm. I call it the Laventel Farms, where we are growing food from concrete. So even earlier in the year, when tomatoes were $25 and $28 a pound, we were selling tomatoes at $15 a pound that we reaped there, right on, well, on our compound, because we built raised beds, and we are in the process of doing that. So that's one thing I'll ask for support in. However, with regards to the food, it's dear to me, because you will not come to the Kwame Ture Center if we are having a fundraiser, which we are doing on the 2nd of December, and get a curry cube. You will get blue food. So throughout everything, I understand what you're saying. So although I'm saying Black Eats London and we will have a Black Eats Trinidad, the conversation is put the title African on it. And yes, I am with you there, because If you have pilau in Trinidad, you have rice and peas in Jamaica with oxtail, you have cook up in Guyana, you have the same jollof rice. It is almost the same thing, the same concept, but called by different names. And we have to, from Trinidad, however, start owning, because this is real estate, in the sense this is business, so that we can now trade internationally on branding these things. A few years ago, just before UNC came in, the national foods were pilau and bacon shark. You ask anyone in Trinidad, anyone around, anyone in Trinidad, what is the most popular street food? They will say roti and doubles, not roti anymore, not roti the way Trinidad say it, roti and doubles. So we have a responsibility. So I am with you. I hear you with the branding. And I want to thank you all so much. I want to invite the community out. This conversation, this issue with Venezuela and Guyana is a real issue. So I want to invite Trinidad to be, the community out on Sunday morning at 11 a.m. to listen to businessman Dennis Mohammed. He will have a lot to share on it. And, just tune into our page, or send us a WhatsApp on 7577955, or tune into our Facebook pages, the Black Agenda Project, or Kwame Ture Education and Development Center, to keep abreast as to all the activities. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure sitting with you beautiful gentlemen, but also coming after my dear beloved sister, who has done so much and who has to be properly recognized in this country for the work that she has done. Thank you so much. And Sister Zakia, thank you so much for the opportunity.
We certainly would like to thank you. You have a number of fans within the chat. A teacher by the name of Aina Ulukayode. You should know her very well, from Arima Government Primary School. She would have taken, as it were, a field trip to the Kwame Ture Development Center. The children had a ball of a time, and she's looking forward to corporate sponsorship, she's saying in the chat. So hopefully there's a corporate sponsor listening on tonight. Hint, hint, wink, wink. You need to contact that Arima school, and you need to contact this teacher. I think she's a deputy principal or vice principal or something of that nature. She'll correct and tell me in the chat, in order to allow for those children to make their way into the Kwame Ture Education and Development Center, so that they can participate in all of the amazing things that are happening there for the month of November. We are looking forward to the lecture coming up that deals with the
Reparation.
issues that pertains to Guyana and Venezuela, as it relates to the oil and other issues there too related. We're looking forward to the reparations discussion. It's going to be a powerful one. I am carded to be out of the country at that time, but once I am in the country, trust you me, I would be there front and center to listen to this. You educated me tonight. I did not know that David Manning's thesis was on reparations, and he's going to be there to deal with this very important issue. I talk about it all the time. We can't, as a society, as a Trinidad and Tobago society, and this goes for everyone in the room, the East Indians tuning in, the Chinese tuning in, the Syrians tuning in, the Africans tuning in. We can't talk about a post-racial society unless we have arrived at a post-reparatory justice society. So until we've paid the dues, we've paid the oppressors, we've paid the former slaveholders, everybody got payment, everybody got land, everybody got reparations, but the persons who were harmed and traumatized and hurt most by chattel slavery, by colonization, and all of those weapons against our mind. I want to certainly thank you for the marvelous work that you're doing. You did a wonderful recap. The land, the labor, the leadership, the liquidity, the money that has come together in order for us really to flow and to function as a people, as a community in Trinidad and Tobago. We've been divested of that. We've been constantly boycotted over time, and we've been sanctioned with respect to our liberty, not only in Trinidad, but elsewhere as well. I want to recognize in the chat one of the generals for the UNIA, actually out of the USA, General Senior Baye himself is tuning in on tonight, listening to Indaba like all of the others. It has been a masterclass on Black History Month, on African History Month, on our people's History Month. Dr. Clyde Winters puts it like this. He calls us the foundational Black Aboriginals. So some of us aren't recently from Africa, but certainly if everyone on the planet goes far back enough, you are going to find that African root there. And the Sagiga would have said we are the black-headed ones. In other parts of the Mesopotamian region, the Salmat Kakadi was the term that they used among the Akkadians. Of course, Kemet means the black lands. So we are proud of both terms. The nomenclature for both is absolutely significant. But I think what we are trying to drive home tonight is when you say black, you need to understand what it means. You need to understand what it means. And when you say African, you need to also understand the meaning, the depth, the richness, the pride that can be found in that. We've had an interesting night, a powerful night, a dynamic night. We're not out of words. We're not out of love. We're certainly not out of faith. But certainly for now, we are out of time. Until the next episode, I want to thank everyone for tuning in on tonight. Thank you again, our very illustrious guest. Thank you again, my fabulous co-host, Baba Dr. Fergus. I continue to grow in your presence. And again, for those tuning on tonight, every Wednesday night, we have a date right here. Same place, same time, same channel. Until the next one, signing out for now, I'm yours truly, Kwame Kamal.
Good night.